Hey everyone, I'm Kaitlyn Barnard.
And I'm Victor Gamov.
In this series, we chat with software developers and technology leaders to tackle your biggest API connectivity challenges.
Stay tuned to this episode for tools, tactics, strategies that will help you to take your distributed architectures to the next level. Let's begin. Today, I would like to welcome Freek Van der Herten. He is a backend software developer from a company called Spatie. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm totally butchering this. I apologize for this, but
No
I hope that's only thing that will happen during the show. Freek, welcome to the Kongcast. How are you today?
Thanks. I'm fine. I'm having a nice work day. Actually, my second one after a nice holiday. So I'm still fresh. I'm good, feeling productive. So everything fine here.
That's great. That's great to hear. And we also like to talk about some productive and exciting things. And today we're going to be talking about some of the somehow unusual topic for me. The people in the community, people around the work that I was done, know that I'm mostly on a Java side of things or JVM side of things. And today we're going to be talking about what? About PHP. And Freek promised me to bring the fresh perspective. And for me, as a kind of old school, Java, probably in the world when the Freek comes from this new in shiny world, the languages like Java considered as a very close to COBOL and a very enterprisey and almost dying out, and the PHP is fresh as it never before.
Yeah. I would say that there is more credit that can be given to Java. I don't think of it as a bad language per se, but yeah, my preferred language is PHP because I spent the most time in there, and it has, like you said, awesome features.
And before we jump to this one, so let's can you talk a little bit to our listeners about your how you end up here? Is it PHP always was your thing, or you doing something else before?
I've been into web development, I think, a little bit over 10 years now. And before that, I was a PHP programmer, not a PHP programmer, what do I say? I was a COBOL programmer in a big financial institution. And I did, I think 7 or 8 years of COBOL first. And I wound up in web development because a buddy of mine, which I was in a band with, he started his own company. He thought, the internet is going to be very big. We need to do something with this. I'm going to create websites. And my buddy, he was good in the visual side of things, but not so much the programming side of things. And he just asked me, hey, don't you want to join me? At the time, I was getting a little bit tired of COBOL. So I thought, hey, let's give this web thing a spin. And at the time, PHP was, and still is, a free language to use. So for me, that made sense to use it because you had also the Microsoft alternatives, but they cost a little bit of money. But at that point in my life, I'm still, not too wealthy, I'd say. So PHP was a perfect choice for me. So I made
and how the tables are turned right now, right? So the Microsoft is almost giving away for free all this stuff, and I remember this period of time as well. I was kind of in the middle, very similar to what you're describing in terms of where you should go. You should go with the Microsoft stack, or you go in with some open source stack. And some of the people who were around me around year 2008 probably. People start doing a lot of PHP work, but I came from more a traditional a C++ world, and for me a transition to something like a C# was more natural. So that's why we kind of have a divided, not the two different the camps or whatnot, camps of or religions, but some people decide, okay, so we're gonna start making money, and people can make money for Microsoft, so we don't want to do anything with this. So I totally get the YP that you're talking about and the situation of the world.
Yeah. It seems like a long time ago, right? And it's also, yeah, like you said, the tables have turned a little bit. Microsoft is really another kind of company now. And also, you touched upon this too. PHP has also evolved. So it's not that little scripting language anymore. A lot of features have been added these last 3 years, which really makes it an enjoyable and powerful language to work with. PHP has like this image of being like too open, too dynamic. And while I like the dynamic nature of PHP, you can adopt a very strict style as well to it. Things can be type input in big ways. Class can be made final. For some people, it's even surprising that you can define even interfaces with PHP. I know that wasn't true in the old versions of PHP. Yeah, so it's come far. There are basically new features coming in every year.
And with the PHP and the evolvement of these languages, I think everything started as a kind of like scripting language on top of HTTP server, right? That help handle some requests, or you can write some like a console script for this as well. But the majority of the work was around the supporting like web development and web developers.
Yeah, indeed.
So does it like still require like HTTP server, or like right now the PHP already coming with like all the batteries included, I would say, right? So can you just like start, do not a full stack, but at least like some of the like a full backend development without like bringing configuration of Apache, HTTP server? That's, some people will listen from PHP world saying like, what are you talking about? Like an old guy, like it's a long time ago. Like how the things are looking like right now, like with the tooling and, the server side development.
Well, yeah, PHP can be run in multiple different ways. It's not only invoked via HTTP. You can just invoke it from your CLI without any server as well. And of course, invoking it via HTTP is probably the most common way to do this. But with modern applications, you also have like you need to define scheduled jobs which are run via the CLI, and this can be done with PHP as well, seamlessly even. There are a couple of very good components. For example, the Symfony process or Laravel 0, which makes it very easy to create console applications with PHP as well.
So, like, let's get back to the story that you were, telling us. So you started this, like, your friend is developing designs, you developing websites. Like, how you progress with this one, and how the PHP helped you to progress.
That's a great question, because there is quite a journey there. I still remember creating my very first PHP website, which I've created more than 10 years ago now. And I did that in Notepad. So with almost no tooling at all. And, using PHP in a very old school way, where I just mixed PHP with HTML in one file. And that's basically it.
As well did.
Yeah, indeed. I think every PHP dinosaur that started 10 years ago, or a little bit more than 10 years ago, did it this way. But of course, if you're going to build bigger things and more complicated application, that structure breaks down very easily. So with the company that my buddy Willem and I and another founder started, we created first very smallish websites, just a couple of pages, nothing too dynamic. But of course, we are ambitious and we want to do bigger things, and clients ask for bigger things. So they want us to create full-blown applications. And for that, you can't really do that on your own. You need really a framework to do that, to handle the routing, the requests, sending responses. These are things that other people can program very well. You shouldn't do that yourself.
Famous MVC model, like arrays of the MVC model that you will try to code the different bits of business logic on the side, and the presentation of this logic will be run on a different side. And that's where my kind of like this is where my branch going into the traditional object-oriented languages start growing bigger, because like all these frameworks, or in some form, were available. If you look at like a C#, there was like a ASP.NET. If you look into Java, there was like GSPs. At some point, there were some open source frameworks appear for building this stuff. So how this situation evolved in the PHP world? Like, was there like some sort of like a framework that united everyone, and everyone started doing some cool stuff with the similar, like a model view controller pattern or whatnot?
Well, like in most programming communities, developers do not tend to agree on everything all of the time. There are multiple perspectives on this. And in the PHP world, we always had like multiple frameworks going on. Some became a little bit bigger than the others. In the beginning days, the biggest boys were probably Zend and Symfony. These are still around today. Zend has been renamed to something else, but I think it's still more or less the same. But one of the more modern ones that came to being, I think, 10 years ago, but only rise to popularity, I think 5 or 6 years ago, is of course Laravel, which is like a batteries included framework. So I think this is also a very healthy situation to have like multiple frameworks going on. These days, it's mostly Symfony and Laravel that are, I would say, the top dogs. And I think both of these frameworks, if I say it a little bit with bad language, they steal features from each other. They steal ideas from each other, but they're each a little bit in their own way. Where Symfony tries to be like very strict and follow the rules, Laravel tends to be a little bit more loose and a little bit more developer focused. And there are things to be said for both approaches, I think.
So, like, is it fair to say that right now is Laravel is kind of like a de facto standard for like web development in PHP, or in general development? Like, what's the position, how this framework positions itself, and like what's your involvement there? Like, how you help to to do the things? Like, since you mentioned you probably since you're a big fan of Laravel, you probably like this kind of like looseness of it, and this is where you can talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in this community.
Yeah. Well, to answer one little question that you said before, or one little remark, I don't think that Laravel is like the de facto standard. It is just a framework, and you can use Symfony or another one as well. I think all of these frameworks have a little bit of personality, and the one which you like best is probably the one that matches with your personality. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I'm very how do you say that? Sensitive against bloat in my code. I really want to have my code be very expressive. The naming should be good and easy to use. The API should be very human to me, even if that means we're not following certain principles anymore. Now, what I mainly do to help popularize frameworks, to popularize Laravel a little bit, is to make open source packages. So every time I have a functionality in one of my one of my applications that I think is going to benefit others too, I extract that to a package. So other people don't need to program that functionality. Examples of this could be, for instance, a good package to send a newsletter via MailChimp, or maybe to send something to analytics, or maybe to have like a very structured log of everything that is happening in your application. And yeah, I think my main involvement is that programmatically, but I also talk a lot with people involved in the development of the framework. So I let my opinions also be known there, and I think it's nice to be part of the conversation where Laravel goes in a broad way. I'm like not the boss. I'm not deciding anything. But I think by just talking to people and just voicing my opinion via my blog, I can make a little bit of a difference there, or at least share some perspective on how things could be solved.
So let's talk a little bit about this one. So I'm quite familiar with some of the communities and some of the software foundations that are around, some of the big names like Apache, Eclipse Foundation. More or less familiar with CNCF process. What is the process is applied for communities for governing this like development of the frameworks? How does it look like? Who's the people who decide what features need to be in the next framework and things like that? Maybe it is somehow also overlaps with like PHP in general, because it's also open source project. And like if you can talk a little bit about this, it would be helpful for listeners to understand.
Well, I can immediately start by opening that the way that PHP is governed is totally different by the way that of Laravel is governed. And I don't want to say this or that is better. It's just different. So with PHP itself, it's very, very structured. It's a little bit rigid in my opinion. Where only certain people who already have contributed to the language can do it again. There's a sort of voting and point system, and only certain people are allowed to vote on the proposed changes, but everybody can take part of the conversation. Whereas with Laravel, it's a lot more unstructured, I'd say. You might think that the Laravel team is very big, but it's actually very, very small. So I think at this point, it's only, 8 people that are working really full time on this. And basically, they just decide what goes in and what goes not. And probably the final say in this is Taylor Otwell, who is the creator of the Laravel framework, who is still very, very actively developing it. Now, the community can voice their opinions too. There's a GitHub repository, the one of the framework itself, where they've activated the discussions tab, where people can discuss a lot of things. And I know that Taylor and various members of the community, of the Laravel team, are also keeping their eye out on Twitter, and they really want to feel what do people need, what is being needed there. So it's not strict or organized. It's much more very it's much more organic than what PHP itself does.
So with this like the community and the people involvement, that's all like very, very important and noble things. However, usually people like living not in a vacuum, so we live in society where some of the material things are also important. So, and some people like to take some of the work that they do for the community and turn it into some of the commercial projects. So how does it look like in Laravel and PHP world? Like, is it like they use like a permissive license that allow to use some of the bits of that you develop in the commercial projects, or is only kind of full separation between there's like only like open source things, and if you want to develop something totally commercial, you need to develop this a kind of like as a separate project, and you cannot reuse some of the things. Like how the situation with like licensing and commercial software look like in this world?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. Most of the things in the Laravel community, at least, which are open sourced, do have the MIT license, so it's no problem to just use that in your own projects.
MIT license, for our listeners, it's a license, a very permissive license. It's just only like basically one requirement is that you need to have the header with the initial authors of the library if you're trying to use it everywhere. But you cannot force liability to original authors, which is also cool. You kind of like keep the name, you keep the fame that you created this. However, they cannot blame you if something doesn't work or something that brings you with with some of the financial losses and things like that. The splendors and miseries of open source.
It sounds like the perfect license, right? To
I use it for all my personal projects. Like I don't mind to share the knowledge because like all the things what I do, like I'm not planning to make some money anytime soon. I'm making money on just like working and helping on the stuff and the talking to the people and educate people. But also like I want to have my name somewhere. Like maybe there's if I help someone, it's just good to have it like somewhere written that Victor did this. So that's my personal license of choice. Like I usually don't think much if I'm doing something like myself. But if I do something for work, usually it's Apache v2 license because of the standard some of the corporations and companies use.
I think MIT is just perfect indeed to make your name. And yeah, this is a topic of its own, really. But once you've made your name a little bit, when you have an audience, then you can start thinking about selling something to your audience and just try to make something that is paid. Spatie, it is a Dutch word. So Dutch is the language that is spoken in Belgium. And it's basically the character that is between words that doesn't have any. It's just a blank character. I think it's called in English a space.
Okay.
And why did we name the company this way? In the beginning of our company, we were only targeting Dutch companies, and we did a little bit more than web design. It was also photography and house styles and everything. And our tagline was, "It's between everything, Spatie." And that was a little bit of the word joke we had there. Yeah, right now it's a little bit more difficult because we only do web design and our main audience isn't Dutch anymore. But we still decided to keep the name because it has so much personality going on, Spatie.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. So how the idea of creating the company come into your I guess with your colleagues, you decided to create this one?
I wasn't really the original founder of the company. That was my colleague Willem. So he basically started a couple of years before me, and he did some smallish websites at the time that focused on design. But he had some clients that really wanted to have more features, more functionality there, and he knew that. Yeah, I could program a little bit. So he asked, hey, why don't we do this together? You do the design, I'll do the programming. We asked another buddy to handle all client contacts. And then basically Spatie in the core of its current form was born. Just a team of 3 who could do more complex websites than they could do on their own, I should say.
And how you choose Laravel for your framework? Laravel, sorry. Laravel is a different thing. Laravel.
And I know what you meant. So we did a couple of years where we used Zen framework. And I think, when was this? Maybe around 2014, maybe 2013. We were getting a little bit tired of PHP. PHP was a little bit in a precarious position, I would say. There wasn't really a good dependency manager, or it wasn't well known. We didn't know it at the time, at least. PHP, the language itself, also didn't have yearly releases yet. And we were mainly taking a look at Ruby. Like, it seemed that community had all the fun where all the nice features were being developed. And we made a couple of Ruby sites. But then, I stumbled upon a blog post about Laravel, and it showed some code snippets on how you could define a model, how you can define a route in an application. And it immediately grabbed my attention because it was so much easier than Zen framework, what we used before. So I checked it out, I was pretty amazed by the documentation that was already there in an early state. And I just started tinkering around with it. And I still remember, like, after only a day with tinkering, I said to my colleagues, hey, we need to use this. Because at those days, we were tinkering a little bit with Ruby and Ruby on Rails, but we were still very much newcomers to it. But PHP, we did know. So it was very easy for us to also know Laravel, and it made perfect sense for us to jump back from Ruby to Laravel. And it's just because of the expressive nature of how Laravel is programmed that we chose to make a gamble on it. Because, yeah, mind you, Laravel seems pretty popular now, but at those days, it was still seen as like the little toy framework where you shouldn't build real applications with. But yeah, we made the gamble and it turned out pretty good for us.
With this community of modules, like what is the main the kind of driver for those modules? Like over the years, like you said, like maybe like 5-6 years, there should be enough modules to have, and basically like you just need to go there and just like compose your application. No pun intended, to compose, which is another like a PHP framework, right? For
Composer, that's the dependency manager.
Yeah, and it is also like Composite with Docker. So the naming is hard in this world. So what's your main like the responsibility right now? Like what you're working on, like personally as a software engineer here in the Spatie, and like what is your like a community involvement looks like right now?
Right now, I'm mainly working on like paid products that we make with our company. So I think I stopped doing client work about 2 years or a year and a half ago. Me personally, I'd say, because some people in my company are still doing some client work because they very much like doing it. So mainly these days I work on products of our own, video courses of our own. And I also take still time to create open source packages as well. Because like I've said, in our company, we still do client work and we still find functionality in that client work that we can open source. And I very much like to create packages that contain solutions for these kind of problems. So I still do that too. So I basically think that I have a dream job because I can decide what I can work on myself. If I of any of my colleagues have good ideas where we can create products for, we have the financial space and the workforce to do it. And I also really like to write on my blog. So I also get involved with the community in there as well by voicing my opinion on certain things and share how I've solved certain problems in our applications.
And these links we can definitely post in the description below. So since you mentioned this, like you have a dream job, so maybe apart from the doing something, you can also showing something. And many listeners know that some people already have this as a favorite part of the show, where the guest is actually showing some of the cool stuff, like some of the tools that excite them or some of the projects that they're working on. So Freek, what are you showing us today?
Well, I'll be showcasing you Ray. Ray is a little debugging tool that we launched earlier this year. And it has a paid component and it has an open source component to it. So in the PHP world, there are basically two ways of debugging. On the one hand, you have like a full debugger experience, probably also what you know in Java, where you can just pause the code, see all the content of the variables. So that's one way, full debugger. And the other way is just dumping statements to the log or to the screen or to your console or whatever.
Printline or console.log was always my favorite debugging tool, like for years.
Yeah, I think it is still a very valuable tool, very valuable technique. Some people frown a little bit on upon it, like you should use a real debugger all the time.
Yeah.
And I sometimes use a full debugger, but if they're like smallish problems, I really like just do the print line kind of thing, dumping stuff. But Ray is something in between those. This is the promotional page, myray.app. It has a description of everything it does. There's even a little movie here where I demonstrate it. But I think it's more fun if I just show it to you live. But this is the page if you want to know more, myray.app. So I actually have a little application here open, and it's basically my application that I use to test Ray. Let's open Ray itself to get started. So Ray is a desktop application where you can send all your debugging information to. If you are using print lines all of the time or dumping something to the screen, and you are solving a kind of complex program, then you might log multiple lines or dump multiple things. And this might really mess up the layout of your HTML. Or if you're tracing log statements and running your tests multiple times, maybe you don't know where your output started or where it ended, or maybe you don't know when you've fixed the problem, where you've actually printed something to the log and that stays then, and maybe it goes into production where it logs a little bit too much. So yeah, with die and dump debugging and print line debugging, it's good for small things, but it can get a little bit messy if you want to clean it up. And this is where Ray comes in. So with Ray, you can basically just use that to send all of your debugging information to. So I have here a little demo command, and this is just an empty command here. And this is something that I can invoke via the CLI. So how you would normally in PHP just debug things is just by dumping something, and this is here, something like that. Let me invoke this. And you can see that it gets here. Oh, and we also pick it up here. I didn't want to show this just yet. This is basically an extra feature. But let me do it with echo here, where you're going to echo something else. Let me clear this. So you echo, you got it here. But of course, if you got a lot of things going on here, and I'm doing it in one file now, but imagine that this is a big application where you have multiple files, then yeah, this becomes a little bit more unreadable, I'd say. So instead of using echo or dump, you can use something like Ray. And we have a little function here. And here I can dump just basically everything that I want. And if I run this now, then you can see that nothing is displayed here anymore, but it's being displayed here. And this has the advantage here that we can make use of a whole lot things more than that is available on the command line. We can basically here put a little hyperlink that links to where you've put this debug statement. So you don't need to hunt down where you've put certain things. So let me go to another file here and just click this one here, and you immediately get back to where this is dumped on the screen. Also, if you dump a lot of things, then it can be confusing to, what kind of information is important and what is not. And with Ray, you can do that by adding some colors to things. So you can say, hey, this one should be green. Let's run this again. And here you can see that we now have a green item here. You can either filter only for the green items. Now, if you do something, execute something a lot, then you might not know where did we start with our output for this execution, and what are the logging statements I should take a look at for this run. And how you can solve that with Ray is by programmatically clearing the screen when something starts. So let me just display the time here also. So now maybe get a timestamp like that. And if I now run this, you can see that the screen is cleared and I only have the output of this particular run. And these are just the basic things, because there are a lot of other things as well, which tie into the Laravel framework itself. We have, for instance, if in your application, you are sending a mail in some way, then we can just render that entire mail just in this application as well. So it's not only logging statements. And just rendering something like a mail that is being sent by your application, it isn't really possible to do on the console because, yeah, we have HTML here going on. So if your application performs queries, then you can basically say, show me all the queries that this application is been making. So here you can see the actual queries that are being performed. And you can see that it can be done by only this line, Ray show queries, and that blue, that's even optional. That isn't even needed. So let's do that again. You can see that the queries now are here, but they aren't blue. And to do this, actually a lot of configuration under the hood must be done. But for users of Ray, it's just show queries here. Now let me show you one of my favorites here. And that is that we can just pause the code as well. So imagine that your code, you're debugging something that has kind of a side effect or something, a loop maybe that writes to a database, and you want to inspect after each write, is everything good in the database? Well, then you can just put a pause in your loop. So here we are going to put a new screen. We are going to pause our code, and yeah, then we're not going to continue anymore. So you should see this immediately. And we also don't see echo in the command line because the command hasn't ended yet. So let's run that pause command and see what we see here. And you can see that this is our pause demo. So we made a new screen with the title pause demo. And you can see that we're pausing now. We don't see this on the screen, and this one is still running. So here I can just stop the execution, or I can continue. If I press continue here, then after a while, you can see after the pause and our script has ended. If I pause and I stop execution, then an exception is thrown and the execution is stopped. And this basically works with no extension at all. This just works in any PHP application. It is just by installing a simple package via Composer, like most people are very, very used to.
We will put some of the links for all these demos, and for all our PHP folks here, you can learn how you can debug this your code now with Blaze. And I was trying to come up with some pun when you were demoing this with kind of like a debugger with the blink of an eye, because it's a ray, just like a ray of light, something like. No, it's pretty impressive, and it is a quite sleek application from perspective. The tools needs to be nice looking tools in order you to use it and you enjoying them to use, right?
Yeah, indeed. That's a little bit of our main goal here with this thing. Just a very sharp tool that is for one exact purpose, namely debugging, and just looks really, really, really well. That was our goal here.
Give us some book recommendation. It can be any book, like any book that you recently read and you're very inspired, or a book you're currently reading and you're super into it, or there's some of the books that you think that everyone should read. So what's your book recommendation, if you can recommend? Or it can be like a good article, or it can be good some blog that you're reading recently, something that will leave our listeners with something to, go and discover themselves.
And it's a good time to ask that question because, I just came back from holiday, and something that I always do on holiday is reading books. So these past few weeks, I've read a couple. The one I'm reading now is a very popular one. It's a fiction one. It's the first one in the series of The Expanse. It's so it's called The Expanse. Leviathan Awakes, I think, is the undertitle. And it's basically a sci-fi saga, which is pretty awesome, if I might say. So I'm reading that one now.
You look like a person with a good taste of reading. I can, double down on the Expanse series. It's a very good reading. In my opinion, even much better than the TV show. I started reading this after I watched the first season of TV show on Amazon. But I found the book is much more interesting, and I highly recommend everyone who likes the sci-fi, like a science fiction, good, like a space type of saga, exactly, to read this as well. That's pretty awesome.
How many books did you read of The Expanse?
I guess 4. I just finished. So they not 100% aligned with the TV show the seasons. I think they split a first book for the first season and half a second season, stuff like that. I think I read 4 by now, and I also was reading this on vacation, and I need to get back on this one. I usually listen books. Like when I was traveled for work, I usually have 1 or 2 books. Like one is something about either business, leadership, or something like that, self-development, and usually another one is about some like light reading, like a sci-fi reading. So The Expanse was really good book companion, a travel companion for me. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the Kongcast. Today in this episode of Kongcast, I had Freek Van der Herten from Spatie, and we talked a little bit about open source, a little bit about PHP, a little bit development tools, and I hope you enjoy the show. And this is where you're saying goodbye and
oh, okay, sorry. Goodbye everybody, and thanks for listening, and thanks Freek for having me on the show. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Pleasure is all my sort. Bye. Take care.
Thanks to everyone out there for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. Make sure to hit that like button now.
And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a new episode.
Don't forget to drop us a comment if you have any questions for today's guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see us cover in the future.
And we will see you on the next episode of Kongcast.